You will travel far, my little Kalel. But we will never leave you, even in the face of our death. The richness of our lives shall be yours. All that I have, all that I've learned, everything I feel. All this and more I bequeath you, my son. You will carry me inside you all the days of your life. You will make my strength your own. See my life through your eyes, as your life will be seen through mine. The son becomes the father, and the father the son. This is all I can send you, Kalel.
Hey guys, it's Luke on Sean's channel. Today I'll be doing my revamped Cyberdragon deck profile. Now this is very different from the one we did before. Main reasons is that this deck was previously hit by the ban list. Now that Verte is gone, I also added a few hand traps and a few different features, and I'm also going to be showcasing my side deck for this. So yeah, let's get into it. So of course I run 3 copies of Cyberdragon himself. He is a level 5 light machine with 2100 attack who can special summon himself if you control no monsters and your opponent does. Cyberdragon is, of course, as you know, the reason you clicked on this, he's just the main guy of the deck. He's one of these few guys that under special summon doesn't start a chain, so he is the main man of this deck. Following in hot pursuit, of course, we have Cyberdragon Core. Now, Core has the effect mandatory on normal summon that when he is normal summoned, you can search for a cyber spell or trap and add it to your hand. Now, Cyberdragons, like Harpies, have a similar concept in the sense that pretty much all of the cards have the name Cyberdragon while on the field and in the graveyard. This is very important to note for when you're going into your fusions, using cards like Machine Duplication, all that other fun stuff. But that's the effect of Core. The final Cyberdragon monster I recommend running 3 of is Cyberdragon Herz. Cyberdragon Herz is a level 1 Cyberdragon. He has 100 attack and 100 defense. Now he has 2 effects, and they're hard ones per turn, unfortunately. Of course, has a regular standard of all Cyberdragons where his name is Cyberdragon on the field and in the graveyard. But his 2 other effects is, if he is sent to the graveyard, you can add a copy of Cyberdragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Also, if he is special summoned, he can make his level become level 5, which can be handy for when you're going into Nova when you want to go into Infinity. Rounding off the Cyberdragon monsters, we have Cyberdragon Nachster. 2 copies of him is absolutely fine. I don't think it's necessary to run any more. Cyberdragon Nachster, of course, similar effect in the sense that his name is Cyberdragon on the field and in the graveyard. But one good thing about Nachster is that you can special summon him by discarding one other monster, and when he is special summoned, you can target a monster in your graveyard whose original attack was 2100 and you can special summon him. So one good thing about Nachster is that you can actually pitch regular Cyberdragon to bring him out, and then you can target that Cyberdragon that you pitched in your graveyard, so you can bring that Cyberdragon back out. The one downside of this is that Nachster, after using this effect, locks you into machines, but that's not too much of an issue. The only other non-machine monster we'd be going into is Linkuriboh in this deck. Anyways, I wouldn't be too worried about that. I run 2 copies of Galaxy Soldier. Galaxy Soldier is great because he's a level 5 light machine monster. Galaxy Soldier has the effect that you can send one other light monster from your hand to the graveyard. You can special summon Galaxy Soldier in defense, and then you can also search another copy of Galaxy Soldier and add it to your hand. Galaxy Soldier's pretty much only purpose in this deck is he's used when we're going into Nova, and then Nova goes into Infinity. And also the fact that he's a machine, so you can actually use him as material for Chimeratech Fortress Dragon if your opponent dimensional barriers you for Xyz monsters. I also like to run 2 copies of Jizukiru, the Star Destroying Kaiju. He is the Light Machine Kaiju, he's very good because he can get rid of your opponent's problematic monsters, and although he has a big scary 3300 attack, most likely that when you bring him over to your opponent's side of the field, you have a way to out him, whether that be with Infinity, just adding him as material, or else using Chimeratech Overdragon to just suck him up into your fusion. Rounding off the monsters now, we have 5 hand traps. I run 3 copies of Ash Blossom, pretty standard hand trap, but I'll go into side decking later. But Ash Blossom is probably the most universal hand trap because she stops your opponent from adding cards to hand, special from the deck, and sending cards from your deck to the graveyard. The final 2 monsters in this deck are hand traps. However, they're a bit unconventional, but I still find them good. I find that Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill is a very good hand trap. Effect Bearer is also a good variant to run this deck, but I prefer Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Shield, mostly because it kind of has the same effect, although it's not the exact same, and with Moonlit Shield you're restricted to when your opponent special summons. Moonlit Shield has the effect that it negates one of your opponent's monster's effects, but another good thing it has is that if that special summon monster your opponent brought out that you negated leaves the field this turn, Moonlit Shield actually inflicts damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. Now I look at Cyber Dragons as like an OTK deck, so just getting that extra bit of burn damage on your opponent is never a bad thing. Whole point of Cyber Dragons is that you kill as quick as possible. I very much label it as an OTK, especially for this build. Although people may disagree with these hand traps, I'll go into my side deck later, so we can discuss which ways you can switch these out when you're going on, depending on what your opponent is playing. Now that rounds off the monsters, it's time to go into the spells. Of course, we run 3 copies of Cyber Emergency. Cyber Emergency is the main searcher of this deck. Gets you pretty much any one of your Cyber Dragon monsters. The only other pretty much searcher in this deck is Cyber Repair Plant. Now you can only activate this depending on if you have Cyber Dragon in your graveyard, but it has 2 different effects, and if you have 3 or more Cyber Dragons in your graveyard, you can activate them both, but if you only have 1, you can still activate one of these effects. Effect 1 being add 1 light machine monster from your deck to your hand. Second effect being target 1 light machine monster in your graveyard, shuffle that target into your deck. Now if you have 3 Cyber Dragons in your graveyard, you can activate both these effects. And as I mentioned before, since almost all of the Cyber Dragon monsters have the effect that their name is Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard, you'll have no problem getting 3 Cyber Dragons in your grave to activate both these effects. I also have Cyber Revsystem. Cyber Revsystem special summons a Cyber Dragon from your hand or graveyard, and also it cannot be destroyed by card effects. Finally, rounding off the Cyber spells, we have Cyberload Fusion. So what this card does is that you can fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck that lists a Cyber Dragon monster as material by shuffling the materials back into the deck from among the cards that are faced up on the field and also faced up banished. And if you're using Overload Fusion in this deck like me, Cyberload Fusion can definitely come in handy to go for that OTK. It's also worth noting that this is a quick play spell, so most often you're going to be activating it during the battle phase, because when you bring out that monster using Cyberload Fusion, only that monster can attack that turn. So if you're using Overload Fusion going with your attacks and then you still have a little bit of damage to inflict, Cyberload Fusion is a good way to go into another Cyber Dragon monster and go for the kill for game. That ends the Cyber spell traps in this deck. I also run 3 copies of Machine Duplication. Now Machine Duplication, pretty much notorious for Cyber Dragons now, is definitely a staple to have a 3. Mostly because you can target, it has the effect that you can target 1 machine monster you control with 500 or less attack, special summon up to 2 monsters from your deck with the same name as that face-up monster. Now it's very important to note that it has the effect that it brings out monsters with the same name, but since the likes of Core, Nachster and Herz all have the name Cyber Dragon while they're on the field, if you bring out Core and then activate Machine Duplication targeting Core, you actually bring out 2 copies of Cyber Dragon instead of 2 copies of Core. This is great when you're going into your XYZ plays to make Nova, or even if you want more materials to make some links. 2 copies of Overload Fusion. Overload Fusion brings out a Dark Machine Fusion monster from your X deck by banishing fusion materials from your field and graveyard. This is mostly used to go into Chimeratech Rampage Dragon, but also you can use it to go into Chimeratech Overdragon. Because my main focus in this deck is going for the OTK, I like running 2 copies of Power Bond. I found Power Bond to be very, very good because it doubles the attack of the fusion monster you bring out using it, which is a lot handier if you don't have the access to go into Seeger to boost up your Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. Power Bond is a way to just double its attack and go for a kill anyways. Also, Power Bond can be sided out depending on what the matchup is, but we'll get into that later. Rounding off the final 4 spells is pretty much a bunch of staples. I have 1 Call by the Grave. This is a combo deck, so it's very important that your combos don't get interrupted, so Call by the Grave is a good way to handle that. Final 3 are just staples I find to be very powerful. We got Raigeki, Monster Reborn, and Harpie's Feather Duster. I find these good because it rounds the deck up to 40 cards by having powerful spells and not just filling it with hand traps. And also I find a lot of these cards, since they're feared enough that it can bait out your opponent's spell negates, you can use this first before you want to use the spells you actually want, like Machine Duplication or Overload Fusion. I will say again, these can be sided out, but we can get to that after. Now rounding it all off, the final 3 cards in this deck, the 3 traps, they're all Infinite Impermanence. 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Now this card was basically made for Cyber Dragons. I know it's a staple in a lot of decks, but look, Nova's on the cover. They definitely made this card with Cyber Dragons in mind. Imperm has the effect that it can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and negate its effects to end its turn. You can activate this from your hand if you control no cards on the field. Also, Imperm has a good effect that if it's set and you activate it, all cards in the column that it is set to, the effects are negated. So even if your opponent has a spell or trap that's face down in the same column you set Imperm, that spell and trap cannot be activated, and they're basically losing a zone for their spells and traps. Now that's it for the deck. The deck is pretty much done, and I do understand that a lot of budget players won't be playing 3 copies of Ash Blossoms or 3 copies of Impermanence. So just another few like different cards you can run. I say there's no harm in playing Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is good because Core actually has another effect that if you control no monsters and cores in your graveyard, you can banish it to special summon any Cyber Dragon monster from your deck. And that wouldn't only be the only purpose of Foolish Burial in this deck. Foolish Burial can also just dump any one of your Cyber Dragon monsters to the graveyard if you need more material for your Overload Fusion to activate. Again, I'd only recommend running this if you want to play it in a sort of budget style. You can cut out a few of the more expensive cards and just get yourself a Foolish Burial as well. Also, Veer, he's another Cyber Dragon monster. I don't run him because I don't think he's that good or essential, but if you're a budget player, Veer is also another option that you can play. The only reason I think Veer is worth a mention is because I definitely find him better than the other Cyber Dragon monsters, but if you guys want to experiment with Zwei and Dry, then go ahead. Like, if you're just looking to play this budget and get used to the deck, then it's perfectly fine to just try out some different things. But if you can build the deck like I just shown you there, I definitely recommend playing it that way. These are just other tips and tricks that you can throw in instead if you don't feel like splashing out the money for an Ash Blossom. I completely understand that. Going into the extra deck now, we run 3 Link monsters. We run Cyber Dragon Seeger, who has the effect that during the battle phase, if he didn't attack, he can boost up one of your other monsters by 2100 attack during the battle phase. He's very good for boosting up your Rampage Dragon, so then he can go in 3 times for 4200 attack. I also run a copy of Salamangreat Almiraj. Almiraj is very good because Core isn't a level 1 for a Linkuriboh, and Almiraj is very good at protecting some other monsters during your opponent's turn. Unfortunately, Anaconda is banned, so he's being replaced by Linkuriboh. Linkuriboh, he's not overly essential. I just think he's good to have in the deck, just because if you're in a tight situation, Almiraj only can be linked if it was a normal summoned monster. You can just Linkuriboh him off and hopefully you survive a turn. Going into XEs, we run 2 copies of Cyber Dragon Nova. Nova is very good. Not only is he an easy gateway for your Infinity, Nova is also good because you can detach material, then target 1 Cyber Dragon in your graveyard and special summon it out. And also he has a quick effect that I don't usually use, where you can actually quick effect banish 1 Cyber Dragon on your field, and then Nova goes up by an extra 2100 attack, bringing it up to 42. Of course, 2 copies of Infinity. Infinity is very good. You can bring him out with Nova just by overlaying. He's an Omni Negate once per turn, and also he can attach a face-up attack position monster to it as material, either that being one of your own or your opponent's. Rounding off the XZs, we have Divine Arsenal Zeus. Zeus is just a very powerful card. Although he can't be used to the full effect that Zodiacs can play him, he still has a place in Cyber Dragons because Infinity can get a bunch of material onto itself, and also Zeus is just very good because not once per turn that can really fuck up your opponent's plays. Rounding off all of the rest of the extra deck, we have 7 fusions. We would like to run 2 copies of Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. Chimeratech Rampage Dragon has the effect that when he is special summoned, you can destroy spell and trap cards your opponent controls to the number of monsters used for his fusion. Also, you can dump up to 2 monsters from your deck to the graveyard, and you can make additional attacks to the number of monsters you dump that turn, making them being able to attack 3 times. And as I mentioned before, having good synergy with Seeger, you can get him up to 4200 attack 3 times with a 4200 attack monster. Also, it's worth noting that he's a level 5 machine, so even if you want to use him as a material to make Nova to go into your Infinity, that's no problem as well. Chimeratech Megafleet Dragon is very good because it's a good way of handling your opponent's monsters that are in the extra monster zone. Because what Megafleet needs to bring itself out is a Cyberdragon monster and 1+ monster in the extra monster zone. He gains 1200 attack depending on the amount of monsters used for its fusion summon, but his attack stats don't really matter. We mostly use them to get rid of your opponent's monster in the extra monster zone. Chimeratech Fortress Dragon is very good. His material is Cyberdragon and 1+ or more machine type monsters. If your opponent's playing a machine deck like Ancient Gears, Infinitrax, or whatever, it's very good at just completely wiping their field and boost him up to a really high attack. He gains 1000 attack for each material used for him. Considering the fact that we also run the Machine Kaiju in this deck, it's very handy to have him in the deck just so you can get rid of him from your opponent's side of the field. Chimeratech Overdragon I think is pretty cool too. Honestly, I don't use him too much. He could probably be replaced by something else, but if we're in a tight situation where we have a lot of Cyberdragon monsters in the graveyard, if you overload Fusion for Overdragon, you can get him up to some really ridiculously high attack. He gains 800 per material used for his fusion summon, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of videos of people on Master who will get him up to a ridiculous amount of attack. Mostly because I grew up watching the GX anime, I find it a sin to play Cyber Dragons but not add Cyber Twin Dragon and Cyber End Dragon. Now Cyber Twin Dragon I think is very good and it's more essential for this deck, more so than Cyber End Dragon, mostly because we run Power Bond and Cyber Twin Dragon can get up to 5600 attack and attack twice. But overall, he's still just very good to bring out. Nova has another effect that if he leaves the field by your opponent's card effect, you can bring out a fusion monster, a machine fusion monster from your deck. So it's good to bring out Twin Dragon, and also sometimes, mostly because it's funny, you can either bring out Cyber End Dragon as well. Granted, sometimes for the memes or even for shits and giggles, I power bond into Cyber End Dragon just to piss off Sean, but you know, that's just mostly fun with your friends. Now, Cyber Dragon along with Heroes and Sky Striker is definitely like my main deck that I'll go to because I've got very confident with it over the years. So Cyber Dragon is one of the few actual in real life decks I have that I actually do have a side deck for. This side deck includes 2 copies of Nibiru, 3 copies of Artifact Lancia, 2 copies of Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, 2 copies of Cosmic Cyclone, and also 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier. Now let me just explain real quick why I run these guys in my side deck and what I think they'll be good up against matchups. So Nibiru of course is very good for combo decks that special summons a lot. It's a very good way of just completely nuking your opponent's field of monsters and bringing out a token. Since Cyber Dragons is a going second deck, Nibiru will have no problem fitting into the deck. Of course, I don't main deck it because just basing on the meta, a lot of decks don't even special summon 5 times anymore, and even the ones that do usually have a negate ready if you for Nibiru in case it does happen. So Nibiru is very good by keeping it in the side deck. Artifact Lancia I think is essential. No matter what the format is, I'd always have Artifact Lancia in the side deck. I've actually even talked about this card in Sean and mine's tier list of hand traps. Lancia is just very good because it stops your opponent from banishing cards from the graveyard. So if your opponent's playing the likes of Dinosaurs, a Grand Module deck or whatever, it's very good. And basing on this format with the likes of Branded Despia and stuff, and also I think the likes of even Sprites or whatever use a lot of effects that need to banish from the graveyard, Lancia is a good way of interfering with that. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion is very good. It's pretty much the Ash Blossom of the graveyard, and considering that your graveyard is pretty much like your second hand in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh now, I think Ghost Bell is very, very good. I don't main deck it because I still think Ash is just a little bit better, but depending on the matchup, Ghost Bell can be very good. Droll and Lockbird, Sean and I talked about this card a lot. Droll and Lockbird has the effect that after your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, you can just drop Droll and now they can no longer add cards to your hand. You've probably already went up against the likes of that Trickstar trap card and being Drolled, where your opponent just completely rips every card out of your hand, you can't draw anymore. But other than that, combo, Droll is very good for shutting down a lot of combo decks that adds a lot of stuff to your hand. So Droll is very good for the side deck. 2 Cosmic Cyclone in the side deck. We already have the 1 copy of Harpie's Feather Duster in the main deck, but 2 Cosmic Cyclone is very good for the likes of the Mystic Mind players and also even the Eldritch players too. Dimensional Barrier is very good because it stops your opponent from going into their extra deck for everything except for links. Although links are very prominent, especially with the meta decks like Sky Strikers and stuff like that, Dimensional Barrier is still very good to go against the likes of the Branded Fusion and Despia. Now this is the deck all laid out now. This is pretty much how I run it, and this is how I like to play it as is, but depending on the matchup it can look very different. For example, if I was to go up against the likes of Dinosaurs, the deck would probably change to look a bit more like this. I'd definitely be throwing in Lancia, and I'd be throwing in Duel as well. This is one of the variations I think could be very powerful. Going against Branded Despia, the deck would definitely look a little bit more like this. Dimensional Barrier can definitely be a good staple going against Despia, and also you can use Ghost Bell too, just to stop all of their graveyard bullshit. Going up against Eldritch or even the likes of Mystic Mind, definitely lean heavier more into the spell and back row removal, and also Lancia is very good because it stops your opponent from banishing, which most decks like Eldritch or decks that play Mystic Mind do a lot. So there's a few different ways you can vary your deck style depending on what you're going up against and you're siding in. So that about wraps up the deck profile. Please let me know what you think. We love hearing from you. Also, if you want a combo video or something on the Cyberdragon, please let us know in the comments. I'd be happy to do it if you want. Cyberdragon can be very universal, and I think that this build itself and also the side deck to go along with it can be very competitively viable and also just a lot of fun to play. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and keep an eye out for all the other deck profiles and all the other kinds of videos on this channel that you guys would like to see. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.